What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we've got something really interesting to talk about, the brand new Absolum hotfix, released as Update 1.03. And trust me, this one's not just another minor patch that sneaks in quietly. It's a solid little update that tackles some of the most frustrating issues players have been running into since launch. I've been following Absolum pretty closely since it dropped, and this patch really feels like the developers are starting to tighten up the game in meaningful ways. So, let's talk through what's actually been fixed, why it matters, and what it says about where the game's headed next. Alright, first off, let's address the big thing that's been messing with people's progress. Those soft locks. You know the kind, when you're in the middle of something intense and suddenly, boom, everything just freezes or your characters get stuck somewhere they shouldn't be. One of the main offenders was tied to Azra, specifically when she was knocking companions off-screen during transitions. That was driving players crazy, especially during combat-heavy sections or when you were moving between areas and the camera decided it had had enough for the day. Thankfully, the devs caught that and fixed it. No more losing progress because your companion decided to take an unscheduled vacation into the void. Another one that's been patched is the infamous counter-clash loop involving Azra explosions. If you've seen this happen, you know exactly how chaotic it was. Explosions triggering explosions, creating an infinite loop that basically soft-locked the game. It sounds kind of funny when you describe it, but when you actually experience it, it's just brutal. That's been fixed now. And that alone is going to make combat encounters so much smoother. It's one of those issues that you could tell came from how deep and reactive the combat system is. Absolum is ambitious with how its abilities interact, but that also means these weird edge cases pop up. The good news is, the devs aren't just ignoring them, they're getting in there and squashing them fast. There's also been a fix for the infinite overpressure bug. This was one of those things that players who like experimenting with builds were running into all the time. It made certain abilities overpowered or just broke the balance completely. The team clearly recognized how that was affecting gameplay integrity, especially in boss fights where overpressure could make or break the experience. So that cleaned up now, which should make things feel fairer across the board. You still get to feel powerful, but not in a way that accidentally breaks the game. And then there's one of my favorite patch note entries ever. The chickens. Yes, the chickens. For some reason, they weren't enraging properly before. They were supposed to react when provoked, but instead they were just sort of standing there, blissfully unaware of the chaos around them. Now they enrage as intended. And it's honestly hilarious to see the devs highlight that in the notes. It shows they've got a sense of humor about their game, and that they care about even the smallest environmental details. Stuff like that might seem minor, but it actually adds to the immersion. Those little interactions make the world feel alive. Now, one of the more important technical fixes is the out-of-bounds transition issue in Molai Village. A few players were finding ways to slip out of the intended map boundaries during transitions, which can totally mess up your run. That's been patched up now, so you can explore without worrying that a step in the wrong direction will send you falling into the abyss. There's also a fix for save slot displays. A small visual bug where your file wasn't showing 100% completion even if you had everything done. It's purely cosmetic. But I get how annoying that can be, especially for completionists. Nobody wants to see 99% on a file when you know you've done absolutely everything. That's sorted now, and it feels like the UI is finally catching up to where the gameplay already was. Another weird but important fix is related to Mordamima. Apparently, she was dismissing companions, which obviously wasn't supposed to happen. Imagine going into a fight and suddenly realizing your team has just vanished because of a random interaction. That's been locked down now, and companions are safe from her antics. It's a relief, especially for people who rely heavily on specific party setups for their strategy. And then there's the exploit involving Brome's ultimate combined with the Chaos Pass Echo ritual. This one was letting players essentially bypass intended mechanics or stack power in a way that trivialized tough encounters. As much as it can be fun to feel unstoppable, exploits like that can actually ruin the balance of the game and shorten its lifespan. Fixing it keeps the game's challenge intact. And honestly, Absolum's combat feels best when you're right on that edge. Powerful, but not untouchable. It's clear the devs are paying close attention to how players are using abilities together, and that level of monitoring means we can expect even more fine-tuning in future patches. The update itself is a small download across all platforms, so it's not going to take you long to install. Depending on where you're playing, you'll see it labeled as version 1.03 or 1.003, but it's the same patch. It's cool to see parity like that across PC and consoles. Sometimes console players get updates later, but here everything dropped simultaneously. That's a good sign for how the developers are managing their release pipeline. Now, what's interesting about this hotfix isn't just the fixes themselves, but what it says about the studio's approach. They're clearly watching the community, responding fast, and pushing updates that actually address what people are talking about. A lot of times, games launch, get one or two patches, and then devs go quiet. But here, it feels like there's an ongoing dialogue between players and developers. The last few patches have all been community-driven, tackling the bugs that people were actively reporting on forums and Discord. You can tell they're not just working off an internal list, they're listening. If you've been around since launch, you'll remember that the first big wave of fixes handled boss fight stability and that weird save overwrite issue. Back then, there were a few desync problems that caused bosses to glitch out, sometimes even skipping phases. That's been mostly resolved, and now this new hotfix is cleaning up the smaller but equally annoying stuff. It's the kind of incremental improvement that makes a big difference over time. The game feels more stable, transitions are smoother, and the combat flow is starting to feel as polished as it was meant to be. One thing I really appreciate is that even though this was a small patch, it didn't feel like filler. Every fix here had a purpose. Sometimes updates just tweak numbers or add vague performance improvements that don't seem to change much. But in this case, the list is precise. Every item solves a real problem that players actually encountered. That's what makes this kind of patch meaningful. It improves the actual experience you have minute to minute. The developers also hinted that more patches are on the way, which suggests they're not slowing down. This is probably just the beginning of a longer post-launch support plan. And honestly, Absolum deserves that kind of attention. It's one of those games that launched with a ton of potential, and each patch brings it closer to realizing that potential. It's the kind of world that rewards exploration with mechanics that feel deep once you start experimenting. The small technical issues were the only things holding it back, so seeing them get cleared out is huge. What's also worth noting is how the community has responded. Players are actually pretty happy with this one. You can tell by looking at the patch discussions online. Instead of frustration, there's a lot of relief and appreciation. People are sharing clips of the fixes in action, showing that the game's behaving normally again. It's rare to see a patch get almost universal positive feedback, but this one seems to be hitting that mark. That kind of response helps build trust between players and developers. When you see issues getting resolved quickly, you're more likely to stick with the game long term. If you're coming back to Absolum after taking a break, now's a great time to jump back in. The performance is solid, the combat is smoother, and those soft locks that used to ruin your sessions are mostly gone. It feels more stable than it has since launch. And if you're someone who loves exploring every nook and cranny, those transition and out-of-bounds fixes are going to make your life so much easier. You can actually enjoy the world without worrying about your game freezing or crashing when you least expect it. One more thing I want to point out is how small but impactful the visual fixes are. That save slot percentage bug, for example, it might seem trivial, but for anyone who's 100%ing the game, that little 99% label can be infuriating. Fixing it shows that the devs care about even the completionist details. It's a small touch, but it makes the game feel more polished overall.